To me, the concept of paradox Pokemon is one of the coolest things that have ever been added to the Pokemon franchise. The idea of how certain Pokemon might have looked or will look like billions of years in the future or past, it's just so cool to me. But it could just all be a hoax and they're actually just from Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. I refuse to rule out the imagination possibility yet. There's way too much evidence via the Dex entries to back this up. Regardless, the designs to come with these new groups of Pokemon have been some of my favorites as well. They're a lot like the Ultra Beasts from Alola in that regard. Very cool looking Pokemon that originated from parts unknown, all sharing that one weird sound effect at the end of each of their cries. And for those who don't know what I mean, here's a couple of examples. I certainly hope the Paradox Pokemon in the Gen 9 anime get the same love that the Ultra Beast like Guzzlord did when he debuted. Bottom line is, these mons are sick as hell to me. So in this video, I'm essentially breaking down every past and future Paradox Pokemon that's been introduced in Scarlet and Violet. Real quick before we do though, don't be a stranger to hitting that subscribe button with the notifications turned on for more Pokemon and other Nintendo related gaming content like this in the future. Starting off with the past Pokemon is Great Tusk, one of the Paradox versions of Donphan that was first teased in the Celestial trailer prior to this game's release. Great Tusk is a dual ground fighting type, still keeping the ground typing of the original Donphan of course, a trend that all the other Paradox Pokemon follow to be clear, that being they're all dual typed but keep one of the original primary typings of the original Pokemon they're based off of. Its Pokedex entries state that recent sightings of it have occurred over the past couple of years. The name Great Tusk taken from a certain creature listed in a book, that book more than likely being the Scarlet or Violet books by Heath. The creature is said to resemble a mysterious Pokemon that, according to a paranormal magazine, has lived since ancient times. These are the type of dex entries I'm talking about that I feel like supports the imagination theory, by the way, just the lack of confidence and or evidence surrounding these Pokemon's ecology and biology. Great Tusk has a base stat total of 570, which most of the other Paradox Pokemon share with it, with the majority of the stats spread for him being in HP, attack, and physical defense, all of which are over 110 base. The special defense for him is on the lower side, but his speed is actually not terrible for being such a big guy. The design for Great Tusk is likely inspired by that of mammoths or mastodons, extinctive relatives of elephants that shared the same curved tusks as Great Tusk. Very fitting for a Pokemon that's said to come from prehistoric times. Next up is Screamtail, the supposed ancient relative to Jigglypuff. Screamtail is a fairy psychic type with the cute little vampire fangs to boot. Am I crazy to think this is the best looking version of the Puff line to date? I really like the fact that it's not a Paradox Wigglytuff too, because it does make sense from a real world evolutionary standpoint. If this mon is supposed to be from the ancient past, then the concept of it evolving into a Wigglytuff would be unheard of for said time period. The same goes for a couple others soon to be named here. The Pokedex states there's only been one sighting of this Pokemon, resembling a mysterious creature depicted in an old expedition journal, plus resembling a mysterious Pokemon described in a paranormal magazine as Jigglypuff from 1 billion years ago. This specific paranormal or dubious magazine possibly being the one titled A Culture, which can be found in the school's library, which further adds Screamtail's existence predates the first molecular life on Earth about 400 million years. Screamtail's stats are a bit of a mixed bag. It has some solid natural bulk to it thanks to its 115 in both HP and special defense, but isn't going to be hitting very hard since both of its offensive stats are at base 65. Due to this Pokemon now being able to learn the move Psychic's Fangs, it's very possible that teeth are actually based on vampires, another creature from, of course, real-world myths. Brute Bonnet is a grass dark-type Paradox Pokemon who's said to be an ancient relative of Amoonguss. The Pokédex states the creature listed as Brute Bonnet in a certain book could be referring to this Pokemon and how it bears a slight resemblance to a Pokemon from a dubious magazine that was a cross between a mushroom and a dinosaur. Brute Bonnet's most notable stat being its 127 attack stat, with 99 in both its defenses. Problem is, it's incredibly slow with a very weak type combo, so it's not going to be living most things anyway. The bonnet part in the name, Brute Bonnet, probably has a double meaning here. Bonnets are known to be puffy looking hats, which the mushroom atop this head looks like, as well as the common bonnet being a species of real-world mushroom that is quite common in Great Britain and Ireland. Flutter Mane is a ghost fairy type Pokemon said to be the ancient relative to Misdreavus. One of the other instances I was referring to where a Paradox Pass Pokemon isn't based off the final evolution for its line. The Pokemon has similar characteristics to the Flutter Mane mentioned in the Scarlet and Violet books, and has shared traits with a ghostly pterosaur that was covered in a paranormal magazine, but the two have little else in common. Like both Misdreavus and Mismagius, Flutter Mane's stat spread is almost entirely entirely spent in both its special stats and speed, all three being at 135, which is insanely strong for a Pokemon with this type combo. So strong, in fact, that it was banned to Ubers and Smogon singles extremely quickly and hasn't been dropped down to OU as of this video. Like how Screamtail may be based off vampires, Flutter Mane is probably based on Banshees too, which makes sense since design-wise it didn't change all too much from Mischievous, a Pokemon that was already based on Banshees to begin with, being dubbed the Screech Pokemon at all. Slither Wing is a bug fighting type and one of two Paradox Pokemon based on Volcarona. This one feeling a bit like a fusion between regular Volcarona and Larvesta, with some dinosaur elements sprinkled in. Pokedex stating it shares traits to the Slither Wing creature from an old book and how it looks like an ancient form of Volcarona introduced in a dubious magazine. Wow, they are really staying consistent with the Pokedex entries on these guys. a little too consistent. Stat-wise, this Pokemon is pretty well-rounded, 135 attack with decent special defense at 105, 81 speed ain't too terrible either. It's possible Slitherwing takes some inspiration from the bagworm moth due to its elongated abdomen and not being able to fly despite having wings, and it might have a bit of Stegosaur sprinkled in there too because of its green spiked tail, which can sometimes be hard to notice. At least it was for me. Sandyshock is an electric ground Paradox Pokemon who's supposed to be the ancient counterpart to Magneton. The deck states there's no record of this Pokemon being caught, but the traits match up with a certain creature from the SV books. Also said to resemble Magneton that lived 10,000 years, featured in a Paranormal magazine. This guy's got some very solid stats, not a single stat below 80 across the board, with its special attack and speed being the most noteworthy, sitting at 121 and 101 base respectively. The material connected to its magnets are supposed to be iron sand to fit with it being part ground type now, with the iron sand on the top body looking like a ponytail to resemble the unruly hair of a caveman. It's also possible that its magnets are used in a stilt-like manner coupled with the long tail as a reference to the Diplodocus family of dinosaurs. If I butchered the pronunciation on that, feel free to call me a dumbass, I can handle it. It seems like not a lot of people are too fond about Sandyshock's design, but I feel like it's very inspired. Roaring Moon, aka the second strongest Paradox Pokemon, is a dragon dark type meant to serve as the ancient counterpart of Salamence. The Pokedex believes this is the creature listed as Roaring Moon in the SV books that still hold many mysteries. The Paranormal magazine believes this Pokemon in particular has some kind of connection to a phenomenon from a different region, that phenomenon of course being Mega Evolution, which was mainly exclusive to Kalos for a while, due to Roaring Moon's wings looking very similar to that of Mega Salamence. Roaring Moon is one of two Paradox Pokemon to have a base stat total of 590, on top of all of its stats being over base 100 with the exception of physical defense and special attack. 139 attack coupled with 119 speed is just absurd. But I would be lying if I say I didn't love this guy's design to death. Almost makes me regret choosing Violet for my first playthrough. Roaring Moon seems to take design aspects from both regular Salamence, Mega Salamence, and even a bit of Bagon and Shelgon. Roaring Moon having Shelgon's yellow eyes and the same gray tuft on top of its head that Bagon has. Its wings having more of a feathery pattern to them to resemble feathered dinosaurs, and what I think is the most obvious, the moon part of the Roaring Moon name being there to match the shape of its wings being in the shape of a crescent moon you'd see in the sky. All of the Pokemon I just mentioned share the ability Photosynthesis, which boosts the highest stat for said Pokemon if they're in the sun or are holding an item called a booster energy. The final past Paradox Pokemon is Corydon, your main traveling buddy when you're playing through Pokemon Scarlet. This fighting dragon type is supposed to serve as the ancient counterpart to Cyclizar. The Pokedex has another name for it, that being Winged King, a Pokemon that's said to have split the land with its bare fists. Although it resembles Cyclizar, it's far more ferocious, with nothing being known about its ecology. Corydon has a base stat total of 670, a total that's shared with a few other legendary Pokemon like Groudon, Kyogre, and of course Miraidon, for example. I feel like it's kind of impossible to be considered bad with stats this high unless you have an ability that hinders your every move. Corydon's ability Orichalcum Pulse passively sets up sunlight while also boosting his physical attack stat, which basically makes it drought but better. He's also got a signature fighting type move called Collision Course, which is 100 base power, 100 accuracy, and has a passive effect that boosts its power by 33% if the target is weak to fighting type attacks. This move's name also alludes to the asteroid that caused the extinction of almost every dinosaur species on Earth. Corydon shares many traits of various lizard species such as geckos, chameleons, and iguanas, but most notably the Anole family, which are known as the fan-throated lizards. Obviously still has some motorcycle aspects to it like Cyclizar, but doesn't actually use the bumps on its torso as wheels since it's supposed to be from a time where wheels weren't thought of yet. Its name being a combination of the Japanese word for ancient being Korai, and Dan, a name used for Spanish lords, as well as a common suffix used in real-world dinosaur names. Now for the future mons, starting with Iron Treads, a a ground steel type that serves as the futuristic counterpart to Donphan. The Pokédex claims it resembles a scientific weapon that a paranormal magazine claimed was sent to Earth by aliens, as well as looking similar to an object described in the Scarlet and Violet books. Its most notable stats being in attack, defense, and speed, all being over 100, with its HP being decent at 90, and the other two being underwhelming in the 70s. Iron Tread's design seems to be a fusion of a spherical robot and a regular car tire, with the treads in its name probably alluding to the treads that tires have on the outside. The panels on its body resembling LED lights as well, which seems to be a common trait with a lot of the future mons looking like robots. Iron Bundle is the living embodiment of the buff Delibird needed for so long. This ice water type was said to have been created by an ancient civilization and has apparently only been cited twice via the SV books. It's kind of unfair how fast this thing is. 136 speed coupled with 124 special attack is absurd. On top of the fact that he gets stab freeze dry so he can hit water types for stab super effective damage. Unreal. Iron Bundle looks like a fusion between a Jack-in-the-Box toy, a snow globe, and some skis for feet. Jack-in-the-Box being a good toy choice because I feel like that's a common toy that was used back in the day to promote Christmas, with OG Delibird being based on Santa and all. Speaking of that, I feel like the bundle part of its name could refer to the phrase a bundle of gifts to tie in with its Christmas theme, and snow globes just tie in with Christmas as well. Its water ice typing also may be a callback to the 1997 Space World demo of Gold and Silver, which featured a different designed version of Delibird that had the same type combination. Iron Hands is a fighting electric type Paradox Pokemon serving as the future version of Hariyama, said to be very similar to a cyborg covered exclusively in a paranormal magazine, with said cyborg being the modified form of a certain athlete, and of course sharing design attributes with the Iron Hands mentioned in the SV books. Like its counterpart Hariyama, Iron Hands specializes in having insanely high HP and attack, but now he's got even more bulk with his defense going from 60 to 108. And it's gotta be nice to have a stab Thunder Punch now. Iron Hands is one of the most straightforward Paradox Pokemon, I think, when it comes to origins. It's literally just a robot Hariyama. Hands were always a big part of Hariyama's design too, so the name Iron Hands is a pretty easy fit, I think. But it still sounds cool to me. Iron Jugulars is a dark flying type Pokemon serving as the future counterpart to Hydreigon, or what I like to call him, Jugs McBulge.
Not Jugs McBulge, are you? J McBulge, no?
The Pokédex says the Paranormal magazine described this Pokemon to be the result of a normal Hydreigon falling in love with a robot. This dex entry being the inspiration for this video's thumbnail, of course. That was the most fun I've had making a thumbnail so far, honestly. Unfortunately, Iron Jugulars is quite a downgrade in the stat department compared to a regular Hydreigon. It's a bit faster, but doesn't hit as hard and loses a bit of bulk, on top of Dark Flying just not being as good of a type combo as Dark Dragon. Poor guy just didn't really stand a chance. The reason he's named Iron Jugulars is because of how long each of his necks are, since Jugulars comes from the Latin word jugulum, meaning throat or neck. A lot of people believe this design to be a missed opportunity due to the fact that Ken Sugimori, one of the most well-known artists for Pokemon, stated normal Hydreigon was originally going to be more of a cyborg dragon with tank-like aspects, which it feels like Iron Jugulars didn't really deliver well on. But personally, Hydreigon is already my favorite pseudo-legendary of all time, so I'm not going to throw a fit over this one looking similar to a design I already love. Iron Moth is a fire-poison type that serves as the future Paradox Pokemon to Volcarona. Still curious behind the thought process of giving both Donphan and Volk two different forms in these games, but go off, I guess. This Pokemon is believed by some to have been a UFO sent to observe humanity, as well as matching the descriptions of said Iron Moth from the SV books, although no records of it being caught were found until now. Iron Moth stats are spread a lot more similarly to that of the original Volcarona, just with each of these already high stats being juiced even more, now having 140 special attack, 110 special defense, and 110 speed. Its HP and defense got slightly worse, but that's not really gonna hurt it much anyway, but it did lose Quiver Dance, which kinda sucks. With the Pokédex thinking it's a UFO, the actual UFO it may be a reference to is the Foo Fighter, which is a type of UFO that was often described as a ball of fire, and of course this thing's a fire type. Its overall design seems to take inspiration from satellites and space telescopes as well. Iron Thorns is a rock electric type Pokemon serving as the Paradox counterpart to Tyranitar. I really do love how the future ones had two pseudo-legendary inspirations among them. The Pokédex entries say it shares similarities with an object from the SV books, as well as a version of Tyranitar from 1 billion years into the future. Stat-wise, this thing is almost identically spread to that of the original Tyranitar, just with a little bit of adjusted numbers because it's based at 570 and not 600. However, its type combination being rock electric on top of losing Sandstream made this Pokemon a lot weaker overall, I'd say. It's still pretty decent though, I guess. Iron Thorn seems to be a reference to that of a mecha kaiju. The idea for future Tyranitar to become an actual Pokemon may have actually come from the Big Monster series of movies from Pokemon Black and White 2, which featured robotic versions of Tyranitar. Iron Valiant is the second strongest amongst the future Pokemon, sharing the 590 base stat total with Roaring Moon. This Pokemon serves as the futuristic version to both Gardevoir and Gallade, and took one of their typings of each to become fairy fighting, having Gallade's Mohawk and sharp fighting style, while also having a dress of sorts around its waist as the Gardevoir portion to the design. The Pokedex says it shares similarities to a mad scientist invention from a paranormal magazine, and how it's likely the Iron Valiant object listed in the Scarlet and Violet book's original notes. Iron Valiant can serve as a mixed attacker in theory, with both of its offensive stats being 120 or over and its base speed being 116, coupled with its amazing overall typing. To be fair though, you could pair Fairy with basically anything, it would be considered a buff instead of a nerf in most cases. Iron Valiant may be based on a paladin, which is a legendary knight from the 12th century, which would make sense since the word valiant means possessing courage or determination, something a strong knight needs to do their job. All the future Pokemon I've listed so far share the ability Quark Drive, which works the same way as Photosynthesis, except instead of activating in sunlight, it will activate in electric terrain. Last but not least, Corydon, one of my favorite looking box legendary Pokemon we've gotten in years. Both he and Corydon are damn near on par with Palkia and Dialga design-wise in my eyes. This electric dragon type is of course the future counterpart to Cyclizar, whose paradox name is listed as Iron Serpent in the Pokedex, said to turn the land to ash with its lightning and being much more ruthless than a normal Cyclizar. Just like his ancient counterpart, Corydon has a 670 base stat total, being more focused on the special stats rather than physical, as well as a signature move called Electro Drift, sharing the same base power and secondary effect as Collision Course, only if the mons are weak to electric instead of fighting. Corydon's ability Hadron Engine passively sets up electric terrain while also boosting his special attack, which pretty much makes this Electric Surge but better. Corydon taking similar traits as Corydon 2, like being based on certain types of lizards and a standard motorcycle, but it also may be a reference to a creature from Spanish mythology known as Suelebre, a serpent-like creature that's associated with thunder, just like Corydon. Its name itself taking the same inspiration as Corydon as well, Mirai being the Japanese word for future, and Don once again being a common suffix used for dinosaur names. I think that just about covers everything y'all need to know about the Paradox Pokemon. Let me know in the comments below who your favorite amongst these guys are, and if I happen to miss anything important about any of them, I would love to know your thoughts. Of course, if you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like down below, it helps out a ton, but for now, I will see you guys next time. Peace out, take care, bye-bye.